Welcome to the Parts Party. I'm Adriana,
And I'm Ella.
and this is your invitation to hang out with us and our beautiful guests as we explore the lived experience of internal family systems. We want to share in our common humanity as humans who have multiple parts within us, so we can show you what it really is to honour this model of therapy in our own lives. This is a place for IFS nerds, therapists, enthusiasts, or just anyone who wants to get to know their parts and their self a little better.
So grab a soft drink for your little ones, a tea for your manager parts, and maybe something fancy for your firefighter parts. Because all parts are welcome. Our guest today is Stephanie Mitchell. Stephanie is a Level 3 certified internal family systems therapist working in private practice on the Sunshine Coast. Her team of 4 staff all specialise in IFS and are trained in the same relational ways of using IFS that Stephanie teaches. Stephanie specialises in working with adults who experienced early developmental trauma, borderline personality disorder, and psychosis. She is currently undertaking research on IFS and psychosis in collaboration between the University California, San Francisco and Flinders Uni. Stephanie is passionate about non-pathologizing understandings of distress and understanding how transference enactments and psychotic experiences can be a tool for healing. Welcome to the Parts Party, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was fun to listen to.
Yeah, nice. Do you want to say anything further to introduce yourself, whether that's professionally or even personally?
Probably the thing that I was reflecting on as I was listening is that I normally say people who have experienced early developmental trauma and experience labels and diagnosis of BPD and psychosis. But I was worried that the bio was going to be too long, so I shortened it. So that's just always important to me, languaging around, people having parts, and they're having parts who are trying to navigate things and respond in certain ways that psychiatry labels as this is the category you fit into, but I tend to not really be interested in those kinds of categories.
Do you want to share how you came to IFS?
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is probably a lot to do with, I know you guys are all about talking about our inner experience and our experience of parts and things. And for me, I started out in mental health as a peer worker, someone who identified as having had their own emotional distress. I had gone through a breakdown and I was coming out of homeschooling my kids. So I'd been at home for like 20 years and was like, what am I going to do? And then going back into the workforce, I had a series of difficult experiences that kind of led me into a breakdown, which then led me to thinking, well, maybe what I could do when I had to go back to the workforce from homeschooling is peer work. So I started off doing that, really identified as a pretty broken person. Then happened to get a job in an organization that then, once my peer work contract had ended, they wanted to keep me on as a support worker. But in the meantime, I had done some training in counseling and a role became available as a counselor. So I started out doing therapy in an organisation. At the time, they were called the Mental Illness Fellowship of South Australia. Previously, they were called the Schizophrenia Fellowship. Because of that, as a beginning therapist, I was really exposed to a lot of people who were just having a tough time and end up with labels. And then obviously in my peer work, I also had that. So what I was finding was that I came to IFS because I was doing work. My clients were telling me that they appreciated the way I was holding them in a kind of very relational and attuned way. But I just wasn't particularly happy with feeling like I was making enough of a difference. So I'd actually gone to see, we had a team of therapists at MIFSA and went to Melbourne and met Simon de Sorgner and did the coherence therapy training, and it just wasn't for me, and he suggested maybe IFS. So that's how I started. But then once I learnt about it, I was like, well, need this for me. So I put my name down for the level 1, but I went and found an IFS practitioner myself. So that's kind of how I really started.
It's such a great way to experience it from the inside out,
Yeah.
to be led through it by somebody.
Yeah, definitely. And I can so identify with that feeling of finding this industry by feeling like a broken person yourself and then
Yeah.
learning to heal. And I'm curious, what was it like for you when you started to experience IFS and especially not just a training in it, but also immersing yourself in it with your own therapist?
I was really relieved because I'd done probably 10 years or more of talk therapy. I was lucky. I had very good therapists. So my first 4 years, I had someone who did individual and emotionally focused therapy, and then I've done transactional analysis, which was my original training. I did some analysis, and then I've done the run-of-the-mill, ACT and all of that sort of stuff. And I've mostly had some really caring, attuned therapists. So I haven't really had too difficult an experience other than just feeling like I'm doing the doing and I don't feel any better. Can I manage a bit better? Yeah, but do I feel crap inside? Absolutely. And so with IFS, all of a sudden, I felt I understood myself better. I felt much more hopeful. I see my IFS practitioner. I've just moved to weekly after 7 years, or actually it's August will be 8 years. So we did 8 years of twice weekly. Took me about 5 years before I saw enough that I felt the way you feel in your body is different.
Yeah.
You're not trying to feel better anymore. You're not trying to do any doing in order to stop your emotional state. You just are in a different place. That took me about 5 years, but that was my parts because I had parts who were very afraid to heal. I literally have a part who's called my afraid of healing part, who has a lot of attachment sort of stuff. So for me, when I first started, I didn't know that. And so it was a beautiful place to begin in that first couple of years of the work. My parts did eventually get quite frustrated that it wasn't doing the thing I wanted it to. Then we found out some more about how much wounding there was in my system hidden under some great managers.
Yeah. I've heard clients talk about that. Although it's painful what's happening, change is scarier or just not worth it for that part. Are you willing to share a little bit more, Stephanie, about what your afraid to heal part was holding and their concern?
Yeah, well, really what it came down to, which is why I now teach on IFS and transference, because this catapulted me down my own learning path. And I'm doing a retreat in November near the Gold Coast on shame. It's taken me down this huge path around shame. So what happened was when I was a small child, there was a significant amount of neglect in my child family. And then there was a lot of violence. And then on top of that, there was some other kind of hooky stuff that happened. I really decided from a young age, I don't know how, I don't know how I came up with this idea, but that I was going to find someone outside of my family who would be the one who was going to love me in the way that I needed. I think because of, my mum was loving, just really caught up in her own trauma. And so the neglect and the not protecting me from violence and those kinds of things meant that you end up with these messages, right, about who you are. So somehow because of her love, this is my belief, and also I had a brother who was, I always say, love with skin on. I don't know who he had in his life, but I was kind of lucky. That really gave me, even though I have exiles who held, I'm okay. I have some pretty good managers. I have a manager called Kind One who would constantly come in, and I have memories of like her patting me on the back at night to get to sleep and telling me it's going to be okay and this kind of thing. So I had this idea if I could just find this person out there that it would be better. And so I've spent my adult life doing that, trying to find that. And then my IFS practitioner just walked into my life and was the embodiment of compassion and love. And I found her. And my afraid of healing part went, well, we're just going to stay in therapy forever. Like I just don't need to heal and she would say, I've been taking care of myself forever. This self stuff's a load of crap. So that was part of the difficulty. And then on top of that, as we worked with that part and she started to feel like, okay, give it a go, what she was really covering, I think, that we didn't know about was really young, disorganized, attached parts. And then managers who hold shame about neediness. I actually went down the path of a 2-year transference enactment with my IFS practitioner, which was very confusing. And I felt a lot of shame because I'm a therapist and I knew what was happening, right?
Mm.
And so my IFS practitioner and I would talk about it a lot. So I wasn't enacting from a place of just enacting. I would talk to her about it. I remember one day we were doing some psychedelic work and I check in with my parts the night before and I check in the morning of. And the morning of, I had heard this little voice, not a audible voice type of thing, but, our parts, when I was half asleep, when my managers weren't quite on board yet. And this little voice had said, I don't want to do ketamine today. I just want to fight with Michelle some more.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I had other parts who were like, what? Oh, gosh, my parts make up some weird things. And just ignored that, went off and did the ketamine. Didn't go so well because somebody else had a plan. But what we found out about that was that, when we could talk about it, we found out that there was a part who felt being angry at her was safer than actually being close because of this disorganization. My therapist parts wanted to go and read every book on disorganized attachment. And so I did. I went and read Dan Siegel and Patricia DeYoung and Bernie Badenoch and Daniel Hughes. I would recommend anything by him. He's amazing. And that helped a lot with my protectors who really hated these parts of me. The angry push away parts and also the needy parts. I had parts who were like, I don't need anyone. That's what the Afraid of Healing part was covering. She's like, we just need to look for the person out there, because if we actually let ourselves not focus out there, then this is all inside.
Yeah. Sounds like incredible work, also hard work, not just sat there, let's see what happens, not really understanding the process, that parallel process of knowing what's going on, speaking to it, having all these parts do their thing. Incredible.
Yeah.
And still being in it as well.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was interesting because, I could say to my IFS practitioner, well, I have a part who's so mad at you, right? And she would always offer, that part can blend if it wants. My managers were like, no way. So I could be a little bit separate. And then there were other times when I was just like, I am going crazy because of the polarization inside. It was actually quite a helpful experience for me because I do work with a lot of people who get called crazy. When I talk to them about their experience, what I hear is polarization. So here was I kind of having an experience that felt, I wasn't crazy. I was still in touch with reality. I was still knowing my parts were doing this thing, but I at times felt so conflicted and jumbled. So it was kind of helpful to feel that and have a tiny sense of maybe what my clients feel.
Yeah. I keep thinking about the difference between intellectualizing versus really experiencing. And even before, you talked about the idea of what healing, what it would want to look like versus actually going through that process, as you said, going through it for maybe 5 years before there was this sense of just being with what is, rather than white knuckling going, I still want to heal, I still want to heal. And this idea, all the parts having different ideas of what that means and what that would look like. And then also that added layer of being a therapist who, quote unquote, knows what is going on with this system and having an idea of this attachment or transference or polarizations, what the parts are doing. And that can really help to have that knowledge and that understanding, but it doesn't necessarily take away how painful or difficult it can be to be in it. You go, okay, I know that I've got this polarization going on, but I still can't really see through it right now. It gives me a little bit of easing, maybe, that I know that this is what's going on, but God, I can still feel the parts holding on and battling for dear life. And as you said, that sense of you feel like you could be crazy, but so much gentleness I'm hearing has come in for you, both in your own experience and then the grace you can give to clients where you go, okay, they're not crazy. This is something that's going on internally for them.
Yeah. The moment that I realized when I feel crazy and I slow down and listen what's happening inside, and then I hear this one says that and this one says that, and then that one bounces onto it, and then that one comes in, I realized, oh, crazy is that fight inside. That for my system, that's what it was. And that was a really big deal. And I actually talk about this on a couple of videos I did with Dick Schwartz in 2019. And I talk about that experience of parts piling on each other and me kind of going like, sort that one out. And then Michelle kind of said, no, the one who's really at the beginning of the sequence of all of those parts is this one. And I'm like, why would we go there? And she's like, well, because they're only reacting to that one. It's been really helpful to realize it didn't stop my parts doing what they were doing, but it gave me moments of perspective and clarity. And then as my parts allowed, because at first they didn't want anything to do with me, as we got to the baby parts of me, that was the beginning of my parts accepting self-energy. I'd done a bunch of other unburdenings, but they hadn't had an impact where my parts trusted me in the same way as once I got to the disorganized baby in me. Her protector basically spent several months testing me. You know, I'd connect with the little baby who wanted love, and then her little protector bouncer who would be like, you know, it's so fascinating. One of the first things that I did, they used to be in a cot, and I would go to visit them, and there was two of them. They were both back in the scene. They're both exiles. One is a little bit of a protector to the exile, but they're both exiles. I would go to see them, and there was one who was just flat on her stomach and just never looked up. Then there was another one who kind of wanted to scream. And when I would connect with the one who would scream, when she first started being willing to connect with me, she would like walk backwards to the edge of the cot. And she wouldn't want me to touch her, but she'd be closer to me. So it was a little thing. And then I went and read Dan Siegel, and I found out that's the kind of things these babies do.
Wow.
It was so interesting.
They know what they kind of need. It's incredible.
Yeah.
These parts really have a life of their own. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm wondering if we can take a step back again to first discovering IFS and actually engaging with yourself as a system of parts rather than a fixed personality.
Yes.
I'm wondering what that was like, especially, you know, we've thrown out words like broken and crazy, and then there's this framework where you can start to interact with these parts. And as you said, it gives you this perspective and clarity. And I'm wondering what that was like for you when you first encountered IFS and started to learn about parts, or whether that was something you were already engaging with in other therapies and IFS added a new lens to that. What was that like?
No, I didn't have any sense of my parts before IFS. So it was really traumatic. I remember being able to slow down and ask inside when I'd start to get dysregulated, whereas previously I hadn't really had a sense of that. I didn't know why I would get dysregulated. As trauma survivors, the types of things that trigger us are sometimes so random, right? And so I remember walking past a chemist one day. All of a sudden, I'm just flooded with this anxious feeling, and just taking a second. This is as I'm learning to connect with my parts in this way, and just saying to someone inside, what did you just see? I used to be so dissociated, right? So I could kind of be in a bit of a daze, see something out of the corner of my eye, and some part would be triggered, and some manager is like, "What? We're just going to an appointment. What happened?" So that was the big shift for me, is I could start to notice what was I not fully aware of, and I could bring that into awareness. And then I could kind of go like, well, that makes sense. You saw the thing and that reminds you of that. And it gives you a little heart, gets your heart racing. And then I could offer some reassurance of whatever the thing was. That moment of being able to reassure my parts was a big deal. Yeah.
The word perspective again seems to be resonating for me around this idea of that neuroception, right? You can automatically pick things up and you don't even realize what's triggered you. It could be anything. It could be a bird flying overhead or whatever it was that triggered you at the chemist, a tone of voice in a relationship, in a conversation or a fight. It sounds so powerful to be able to have this moment where you can go, okay, I may not know what's going on because it's just that one part that picked up something in the field in that moment and got triggered. But it sounds amazing to be able to engage in perspective taking and go, okay, what did you pick up on, or what's happening for you right now? And to be able to have that relationship inside with parts of yourself.
Yeah, it was amazing. And my IFS practitioner used to say, you have a lot of self-energy, Stephanie. That was really early days. So I'm telling you that later on, my parts are saying, I don't want anything to do with self, right? But at the beginning, that wasn't the case. It became later as the transference sort of came into the space. But in the early days, when I say early days, first 2 years, it was maybe a little manager-led. I don't know exactly, but definitely there were times when just that perspective taking and then me reassuring was really helpful.
Wow. It's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect, that trust would grow. But I guess I'm thinking about some of the couples that I work with. That the first couple of years of their relationship is really good. And then when they feel safe enough, actually all the difficulties come out. So I wonder if, I don't know, I'm just speculating, but the relationship between you and self finally felt safe enough that it became difficult because the healing was available through that.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Listeners can't see that as soon as you started talking about this, I'm just like leaning in because that has been my experience. I've been trying to put words to it because I'm still kind of in that where I've got parts that suddenly don't want to have anything to do with self. In my early days of IFS therapy, I didn't have that issue. I was very self-led and it was quite easy to access self. Yeah, I wonder whether it's layers of healing exiles that now are safe enough to engage that had ideas about self that these other parts that I've helped in the previous years of therapy didn't have any issue. They didn't have that same kind of trust issue. I'm not sure, but it's fascinating. I'm just here pondering.
Well, in IFS, we always say just ask, right? So be curious to
Mm,
ask your parts if there's a particular reason.
yeah.
Yeah. There's two things. One is my parts were really afraid of anything nurturing or caring. That felt really
Mm,
dangerous. Just before COVID hit, I was in San Francisco with Dick Schwartz at a retreat, and he did this beautiful demo, and there was this woman and she had a lot of love for her parts and was very nurturing, and everyone in the room was tearing up, including Dick Schwartz. I was freaking out. My parts are going like, danger, danger, Will Robinson, because nurture is not safe, right?
mm,
So as long as I could stay in that like reassuring, I'll take care of you, big buddy, big sister kind of role, my parts could manage it. But as we got to more tender places, and they were like, we're not having any of this care stuff, that leads to somewhere dangerous. First, my IFS practitioner, she'd gone on holidays and I'd be like, yep, no worries, see you, all good, have fun. And then towards the end, it was like, what do you mean you're going away? My parts were very attached because my father was violent. My mother would sometimes just vanish, disappear, like leave us. And more than once when she left, I was really afraid for my life, basically, of being left with someone violent. And there was another really violent person in the space too. So between the two of them, my dad and this other person, it felt pretty scary to have my mum not there. So once this transference piece became a thing, every time my practitioner would go away, I would feel that same trigger. So it's really great fodder, right, for our work,
mm.
for me to
Yeah,
go towards
yeah.
the many, many trailheads.
And how did you find resolution, insight, healing, or is that something that did then get worked through?
That particular trailhead took a lot of working through. We did so many unburdenings, and what I've realized with my system is that many parts hold the same burden. We would unburden one part. My system, again, I think because of the level of trauma and the level of dissociation, it's not that common to have one part in an unburdening. I think three. I think three is the highest amount actually that I've had. So although I did a collective unburdening recently that had a lot of parts, someone's telling me every part in the system was part of that. So,
Wow,
Mm.
gorgeous.
yeah, I don't know if you've heard of the internal collective unburdening.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more just in case any listeners like me haven't heard of that.
It's essentially when a lot of parts carry a burden or similar burdens and they feel ready to all collectively unburden together.
Mm.
And everyone does it differently. My system takes a long time to process the witnessing. They really want me to get it. So
Mm.
I did months of witnessing around what they called, I had a matrix inside. So basically we'd unburden a bunch of parts and then they were never fully unburdened because they said there's like this one core part at the core of everything. And
Mm.
until we unburdened that one, but that one couldn't unburden until everyone else. It was like a real matrix. They were all linked. That was all linked to one particular memory. And we couldn't unburden that memory until we'd really got all the linkages. Then when it felt ready and everyone felt like, okay, you got my part of that, because everyone had a piece, we went back to that one memory, which is funny. And I don't know how you guys feel, but I always think it's funny. What seemed the most traumatic things were things that were not what would have been called a big T trauma. A friend of mine, I'd gone to visit her house and I'd walked into her mum's bedroom with her and her mum yelled at me. And this was the linchpin out of all the terrible things that had happened to me. This was this part saying this was like the moment where all of my previous experiences came cascading to crash on me. We went into that scene at my friend's house. We did the various pieces that needed to be done over with that particular scene. And then some other parts just came in and said, same thing happened to me, but over here in a different way. So I want to confront that abuser, or I want to have that thing done over there. We did a 3-hour session. Everyone gets to have a turn until it feels all complete. From there, the integration piece is where it ripples out to every part. So there was probably only, like, I haven't really added it up. There probably were 6 parts in that, but it ripples to every other part that has this same thread.
Incredible work. I wonder if this was your experience as well, Stephanie. The parts feel supported by having the others there. Like there's something really precious about the little group. The ceremonial aspect when there's a few feels enhanced as well.
Yeah, I love that. We set up a whole ceremony before we even began because we knew it was going to be this big thing. So we lit candles and we asked them, what things do you want? And I have a retreat center inside. So we all went to the retreat center and we set it up. So we had ceremony before we even began the actual unburdening piece. And then the unburdening has its own ceremony. And yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I'm really curious. We've started talking about self, and I'd love to hear more about how you experience self or how you understand it, especially considering there's been this journey where you felt quite self-led at times in the early stages of IFS therapy and then felt like parts then really resisted. And yeah, I'm wondering maybe now how you experience self and if that has changed at all.
My self energy feels like a loving parent. My parts have just never had that.
Mm.
So sometimes I'm like the mama bear who's going to stand up for them. And I have some really fierce ones. In my childhood, the only safe emotion was anger. So I have some pretty good fight parts. They're like, you need to be as intense as we are. My self energy has a lot of courage and assertiveness in it, but it has a lot of nurture too. The most helpful thing for me is if I'm really blended with parts at times, inviting them to see me is helpful. And sometimes I just let them blend. In transactional analysis, which is again what I was initially trained in, we talk about having a feelings racket. And I just love that term because it describes the felt sense of an old feeling. You can't get out of it. I don't know what they mean by racket, but I almost imagine it bouncing back and forward. So when I'm feeling like I'm in a feelings racket, I just let my parts blend and say whatever they want. And I'll say it out loud sometimes, like, I hate feeling like this. I just want to get out of here. And why is nothing working out for me? I'm always in this place of just feeling like this. And that person over there, why do people never understand me? Like whatever it is that they're tossing around, I'll just let them say it out because I get clear then. Okay. And I tend to know the flavor of my parts. As I'm hearing them, I'm like, oh, hello. They'll have names. I name all my parts. I have one called Ping and another one called Lucy. And
Makes it so fun when they have names or when they tell you their name. It's nice. Yeah.
Do you have parts have names, Ella?
Yeah, absolutely. Rainbow Bride and Lizzie, and some are just 16-year-old, but yeah, lots of them have names. Justine and Amy G. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, Amy G is Am I Good Enough is where her name comes from, and Justine comes from Justice.
What about you, Adriana?
I have some that have names, and then others, it's just energies that I feel or kind of get a sense of their age or the age that they've been holding, whatever burden they've been holding.
My parts like to choose a name, especially after unburdening. Sometimes they just came up with a name. Ping is a part who used to vibrate with people's energy and it wasn't a good thing. And then when she chose Ping, my other parts were like, isn't that like the opposite? Like, why would you want to be still called that? In Chinese, Ping actually means calm.
Huh.
So it's really lovely sometimes. They'll just choose something and then we'll look it up and then the meaning means a lot. And then other parts say, oh, I want to be called light bearer, but they want a name that means that. So then we look it up and one of my parts is called Ayla because it means light bearer. So yeah, it's kind of been fun.
Yeah. I want to go off on a slight tangent, if that's okay. As we've been doing this podcast, we've had experiences, Adriana and I, of getting fangirly and shy and having a bit of a parts party around some of the incredible people we've spoken to. You've talked about doing things with Dick Schwartz. Was that a parts party for you, especially the first time? I'd love to hear how you navigated that.
You should have seen the parts party in Italy when I first approached Dick to ask him if he would do a video series with me. And I thought, this guy's not going to take me seriously. At my level 3, I was a red hot mess. I was triggered everywhere. And he had done a demo, and it was an incredible piece of work where he got nowhere with this client. And I loved it. And I was so frustrated at him because I said to him, that's what we need demos of. We don't need demos of you doing unburdenings. We need demos of you doing the hard stuff with clients like that who don't get anywhere. You're just hanging out with a protector who just takes them offline. And so I said to him, we should talk about this on a video. I had my little list. I literally walked up to him and said, so Dick, I was thinking we really need to do this thing. And I had my list and I said, and this is what I want. And I'm thinking we could do a series and then this is what the series will be and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, oh yeah, that'd be good. And I went, oh, right. Okay, great. And I turned around and I walked away because I was so nervous. I couldn't believe he said yes. I was like, get out of there before he says no. It's pretty funny.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked you. That's adorable. I love that. That's really cool to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reflecting on even just this podcast. I feel like my system relaxing a little bit, parts that have judgments about how I should be or like all sorts of stuff. And there's something about just, as you said, when it isn't going right and being able to have that be shown, whether that's in your own personal life, whether that's your own therapy journey and whatever parts are going on inside, and someone as incredible as Dick not being able to get anywhere with a particular client during a demo. It's so true. I feel like that is what we need to see more of because everything can be so curated. And that's part of the crazy making is when we think that we're somewhere that we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate even just this podcast and hearing that idea, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. I ended up doing it with Michelle. She didn't get a word in edgewise. I was so nervous. I just talked nonstop.
That's great. Do you want to share anything further about your offering, Stephanie? You mentioned briefly a shame retreat in November this year, which is 25, if people are listening in subsequent years and want to come.
I don't know how often I'll run it, but I will run it again. The shame stuff was huge for my healing. When you ask about my resolution, oh my gosh, the resolution of the parts who were in the transference was all about letting myself be a little needy baby who needed love, letting my parts want that from my therapist, because it was only when I could really let myself want that that I would then be able to feel the things that I didn't get with my mum. It was such an interesting experience to realize I needed to let myself kind of be a bit what I felt was crazy, right? That I want this woman to be my mother, basically. There were young parts of me. And I went and actually saw Patricia DeYoung, who's written a book on understanding and treating chronic shame. And she said to me, it doesn't really sound like Michelle has a problem with your little ones wanting her to be your mum. And I said, no, she doesn't. I'm the one with the problem. She said, well, that's good. And I'm like, no, it's not. I'm really not managing. I was like crying and like, it's not good. And she said, no, because we can help. You know, she said, if the problem's in you, we can do something about it. So I was like, oh, okay. So that really helped catapult me into just allowing my managers to surrender to having these little ones just want what they want. And then once that happened, it became less focused on Michelle and more focused on what I didn't get back there. What I went and studied was why parts use transference. And it's essentially, there's three main things in my opinion. One is to avoid feeling the pain of back there, so I make it about the present. One of the main other things is there's something about the aspects of me that have to be disowned, that I can't get near. And then there's a third thing, something to do with proving your love.
I like testing.
Yeah, I'll find something that proves of once and for all. I had a client once who wanted to have sex with me and we unpacked it and I said, what would it mean? And he said, well, for you to know me as beautifully and all my flaws and still find me desirable,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And I said, oh, yeah, makes sense. Your parts would want that, but I don't think that us having sex would give you that, right?
Mm.
Right? Because that's a really young place that came to work that out, that
Mm.
that would be the case. So for me, I think they're the three reasons that parts use transference, which is why we have to hold a lot of compassion and openness to really stay in it there with them rather than going, of course I can't be your mother, or of course we're not going to have sex, or of course we're not whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the courage. You used that word that yourself, and she has a lot of courage to not go, professional boundaries and just
Yeah,
make it
exactly.
really awful for the person, but to
Yeah.
just really understand why. That would have been such a big moment for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they still have shame. I said, how was that to talk about? And another part, not the one who says they want to have sex with me, another part says, I can't believe we're talking about this. I'm so humiliated. So that's really why I'm doing the shame sanctuary is what I'm calling it. In 2022, I went to the US and hung out with Tony Herbine Blank for a week and Martha Sweezy and Jory Agate. And yeah, we just did a deep dive into working with shame. And that was just another layer of my healing. And so the shame camp that I'm doing here, the shame sanctuary, is springboarding from my healing. I teach now a 3-month immersion into IFS and interpersonal neurobiology and looking at transference and how to hold our clients, whether our clients are needy or whether they blame us for everything that goes wrong in the therapy room and everything feels bad, or, however they use those kinds of transference enactments. There's ways that we can be with clients. So I have some pretty good demos of clients who, scream at you and tell you everything that you do is wrong, and watching me navigate that because I've had some of those kind of clients. Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about offering a space where people can come and either work on their own parts, like with the shame sanctuary, that's very much work with your own shame and shaming parts, or come and do some professional development around how to deepen into ways of being with your clients in a way that doesn't really matter what happens in the room. It's not going to be too much.
Sounds wonderful. And as I say that, I think we're a special kind of crazy if talking about shame and trauma and just getting in there is my idea of fun. It's such a different way of approaching it, isn't it? We're not plunging in there. We're coming at it with such a different energy so that it is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the name is perfect. Shame Sanctuary.
Yeah. So from the very first night that you arrive, we're talking about what parts in you shame you.
Mm.
And then being with them, I'm going to do some parts externalization exercises and ways to really get to know our parts who hold shame and our parts who shame. I think the layers of healing that come when we can work with our shame and shamed parts, it just deepens everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to share your quote to finish, Stephanie?
Yeah. So this is actually really important to me. So much of my life, I have felt like I have a lot of intensity inside, and I had so many messages that that's not welcome. And so this for me is a Carl Rogers quote. My managers had learnt that I'm supposed to try and ignore the various things that happen inside of me. And this quote speaks to how much I want to bring acceptance to my clients as well as my own parts. Carl Rogers says, I can be with my experience with all its variety and surface contradictions. I can formulate myself out of this experience instead of trying to impose a formulation of myself upon this experience, which would prevent any awareness of those elements that don't fit.
Thank you.
I am this bundle of parts in
Mm.
connection. I'm in connection and they are me and I am them, and I don't have to try and be a certain way in relation to what society tells me to be. I'm just all of these experiences inside.
Yeah, and it makes me think of the intellectualizing again, like thinking your way out of all these parts rather than just being with them, knowing they're
Yeah.
okay and hearing what they're about.
Yeah. One of my mentors said, I know that she'd made a decision and she regretted it. And then I sort of said, oh, what was going on there? And she said, oh, it was what my parts wanted at the time. And it was very loving for me. It was like a really good thing for me to realize she has a lot of love for where her parts were at the time.
Mm.
Mm.
They made some stuff that they later regretted, but that she has nothing but love for. That's where they were.
Mm.
I just felt, what a nice way to be. What a nice
Yes.
way to hold ourselves.
Yeah, it's like an even more hard open way of saying, you did the best with what you had at the time. But yeah, I love that's what the parts wanted at the time.
Yeah, really touching.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being so forthcoming and open, Stephanie, with some of your journey with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I have parts who really value sharing, so it wasn't hard for me.
So appreciated. Thank you for this time.
Thank you for being part of the Parts Party with Adriana and Ella. We hope you enjoyed being with us, and we wish you many moments of self-leadership. We'd love your support by liking, subscribing, sharing this podcast, and we hope to see you next time.